Commission done recently in this field?
Доброго дня всім.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is afternoon already.
Я спробую
I will try to
коротко, але пройтися по темам, які я вважаю актуальні були за останні 12 місяців, і які будуть актуальні в наступні 12 місяців. Почну, оскільки в нас, як ви знаєте, можливо, відбулися перерозподіл структурної в комісії. У нас був один комітет інфраструктури, зараз він поділений на два. Комітет, який його називають трейда і посттрейда. Так от я приблизно так і структурую зараз бачення того, що відбувалося і що буде відбуватися в цьому напрямку. Перше, по трейду. Почнемо з інструментів. Я вважаю, що найбільшим нашим досягненням минулого року є досягнення фактично і домовленості, і вже вони є зафіксовані в меморандумі з Міністерством фінансів щодо ОВДП. Тобто ту концепцію, яку ми намагалися імплементувати останні 2,5 роки щодо запровадження інституту маркетмейкерів, щодо, скажімо, додатку більшої прозорості до ринку ОВДП. Я сподіваюся, ми досягли принципової угоди, і наступних 12 місяців буде важка робота, але зрозуміло для того, щоб побачити там результат. В рамках роботи з ОВДП буде дві зміни. Перше, до кінця року маркетмейкери працюють в режимі тестовому, з нового року для них це робота на вторинному ринку стає обов'язкова. Зараз інша тема в рамках полегшення доступу клієнтів до первинного ринку. Ми вносимо зміни, і фактично з'являється поняття як первинних вже не ділер, а первинний брокер, як ми їх називаємо. Тобто буде можливість клієнтам давати заявку, і вони будуть напряму ставати, власне, отримувати титул на облігації після аукціону. Тобто не буде транзакції через ділера, а потім на клієнта. І Національний банк уже вніс, наскільки я знаю, свої зміни в цю тему, а ми ось буквально в п'ятницю наступну виносимо це на комітет, і далі на комісію, я сподіваюся, що ми теж найближчим часом проведемо ці зміни. І ще однією інновацією, яку ми бачимо в ринку ОВДП, це є запровадження ринку T+. Тобто, як ви знаєте, сьогодні на все торгується на 100% депонуванні. Ви знаєте, що почала роботу робоча група з учасників ринку, організована Арtem. І якраз пан Юрій Іванович, який щойно зайшов, очолює цю роботу, і ми сподіваємося, що до кінця року він нам від концепції запропонує конкретні кроки, як ми зможемо рухатися в напрямку торгівлі облігаціями, найбільш бенчмарками, найбільш ліквідними випусками в режимі T+. Акції. По акціям найбільша подія минулого року – це прийняття закону 2141. Ми вважаємо, вона кардинально фактично розділила компанії на приватні і публічні.
Bisected all the companies into private and public. As for the public companies, there are not enough of them if they exist at all, but at least it's finally regulated. And the companies which would really want to stay at the public field, all of the rules have been already created. They are very close to the European rules, and I hope they will be comprehensible for the investors, not only from Ukraine, but for the foreign investors either. So we are moving into the right direction. Out of the shares market, we have a rather big problem, which existed before, but it has become acute with the procedures of squeeze out, which is happening now. So for today, Ukraine had approximately 120 squeeze outs, summing for 100 plus million hryvnia, and we are having approximately 22-23 complaints on these processes connected with the assessment and estimation. This is a huge issue. The law 2141 is not that useful, but it gave an opportunity to the Commission to become the player at this field, so we're trying to create the provision about the auditors of the socially important companies. We are interested in three situations: the sellout, the squeeze-out, and the case of the third one for a separate type of the companies. We want to, not all of the auditors, but only those who are correspondent to the high requirements, for them to have an opportunity to provide services at this market. The third, the stock markets. The stock markets. Well, again, a very interesting year. Unfortunately, the consolidation which we're dreaming about has never happened, but we had some different events. As far as you know, the Chinese stock market wants to come to the market from Bahai. So far, unsuccessfully, they are trying to buy the share in PFTS, and because of the events which took part 3 months ago, on the 18th of July, the stock market had to stop its activities because their software was under the sanctions. It also now is trying to search for the partner. There is an option that this partner will be this very Chinese stock market from Bahai. So the consolidation we couldn't get for 10 years, maybe, well, if it was not done by the Russians, maybe it will be done by the Chinese. Well, we will see. It's one of the scenarios which is possible. From the point of view of our regulations and legislation at this field, well, of course, we're speaking about the law 9035, which used to be 7055, about the regulated markets. We do hope that the adoption of this law will give an opportunity to the stock markets to become universal in Ukraine, and they will get a full list of the products which they can give, both financial and goods. And timely, since the 1st of October, we have the start of the project with BME, Bolsas Mercados Españolas. Well, of course, this is the Spanish stock market, which, if you remember, we had a similar project on post-trade with Oliver Biden, when we had a concept on the funding of post-trade. Now we'll have the similar work done, how we should organize the trade and how it should be integrated with the post-trade. The fourth, the depository. Well, of course, it is our important element and component. We are really satisfied with Mindaugas signing the contract with Percival, and we finally began the work with the software of DBAND setup. We have the high expectations about this project. We see that the professional team is working with Mindaugas. We believe in them, and we hope that during those terms they mentioned, up till the end of the summer next year, we'll have the full functioning product, which will give an opportunity to the participants of the market to issue new products, which will become the depository system more safe, modern, and will give an opportunity for us to get to achieve the next level. The depository institutions have also overcome certain changes during the last season, as we say, the last year, and again thanks to very active work from the depository. I mean the law which has been adopted as for the implementation of the concept in Ukraine. This is an important event. We saw it a bit in a different way with the Commission because we used to think that it will be in the framework of the broader change of depository system, but my colleagues took the initiative and we are very grateful for that. This law exists and now we have a great challenge to make it work. As far as you know, we have a very complicated law on, as we say, FIMON. So the integration of this law and the certain worries of the Commission, which tries to follow the corruption issues and the activists and the prosecutor's office, we need for them to make deal and to this concept to work, to follow not the spirit but the letter of this law. It could be not functioning, and all of those efforts can be just wasted. And of course it would be a huge disappointment. I do hope that it will never happen, both for the Ministry of Finance, because they are expecting for foreign investors coming to the market of the internal governmental bonds. And this is our wish to get to the more civilized club of countries. The fourth point in my list, the sixth point in my list, is the calculation center. I've already mentioned it in the context of the issue of the project of the internal governmental bonds sales with the T+ calculations. This is a hard task to conduct. We are having with the National Bank certain debates and discussions as for the future of this institution. So, to get this procedure right, we think that will involve an advisor, a consultant who will assess and will conduct the cost-benefit analysis, who will provide the assessment of the use of this institution. We do hope it will be a positive conclusion, because the market in Ukraine does not begin and end with financial tools only. As far as you can see, half of our panel discussions are involving the goods market. As you see, there is a huge pressure from the international community for the gas market, the electrical energy market. So we see that we can make it a full-scale clearinghouse and the central counter-agent in the perspective, which would give an opportunity to decrease the systematic risks on those markets and to give an opportunity for them to develop. That is as for the legend or the history. In short, what we see in a nutshell for the further perspective. Dmytro,
if you don't mind, let's be more precise. Let's make our discussion live to add some energy. Maybe let us just start to discuss the issues, and I believe it will be a little bit interesting. So you mentioned the nominee holders law, and we understand that there is a kind of problem with the financial monitoring, but the holders law shall come into force in November. The question might be for you and might be for Mindaugas, because I understand that the CSD is also involved in the elaboration of legislative basis. So where we are we ready to start in November? What obstacles do we have?
Я думаю, що можемо трошки не встигнути, тому що так як проходить наш документ, ви ж пам'ятаєте, нам 30 днів треба висіти на сайтах, там погоджувати, поки пройдемо всіх погоджувальних органів, там, мені здається, математично ми вже не встигаємо на 1 листопада.
We are not in time with the 1st of November. But we've prepared all of the adjustments and amendments, and we have the call with the SkyMF, the Commission from Poland. We have certain questions for them. They want to get certain consultancies, how people are doing that and conducting that in real life, and we'll try to combine it with our real opportunities. The committee will be held on Friday. The project of the changes, I mean next Friday, not today. So I do hope that for Tuesday we'll have it for the Commission consideration, and if it's done okay, we'll get it in a week. We'll have then the draft of the changes or amendments as for the nominees. We're doing everything possible about that. But what will be as a result, we'll see.
Mindaugas would help from the technical point of view. What do you see are the obstacles where we are in the depository system with the implementation of
the concept? In my opinion, we have three issues to address while together within the working group, including Commission and other market players, we want to add details how this concept will work. So the first issue is obviously the requirements for the foreign financial institution who can come to Ukraine and open the account. So it is a fairly respected will from the regulators to limit the number of, well, basically not even the number, but seek only the highest quality service providers that would be coming to Ukraine and ensure the maximum security and transparency of the information once they open the accounts for their clients. The second issue is the instances or the moments when the information about the transactions and who is behind the transaction will have to be disclosed. And the third, obviously, is the contents of that information. So, yes, there are different opinions right now in the working group, and different teams of lawyers are working on it, so that the concept would be working concept. Because if we find the final document to such level that on every movement of securities a huge number of data has to be disclosed, it will not just work. So we ask for opinions from different associations like European Securities Depository Association, from agencies like Thomas Murray, and we want to get the most objective kind of criteria so that it would be still kind of workable. It would not look stupid in front of foreign investors, and all the regulators will be happy.
Okay, thank you. Let us move a little bit forward. Let us maybe discuss a model of infrastructure. What model do the regulators see? And do you think a single level depository system would have any advantages or disadvantages? And this question I would also like to address to Andriy, because like we or do not we like this, this is still the depository institution for sovereign securities. So maybe let us start, Dmytro, with you. What is the Commission vision of the model of infrastructure, and what is your attention in levels?
I think that, and this is the flexibility we need to achieve implementing the independent work, that those systems should be served by so-called healthy participants. When I say healthy, I mean that we take, for instance, the National Bank of Ukraine work. I mean financial health. I mean even reputation health and transparent as for the ownership and institutions. Those are the key factors for us. Everyone who can get under those conditions and notions have to serve their clients and provide services at the second second level, and there won't be any other issues. And of course, you need the software to join. So there are 4 requirements. In fact, all the rest will work in the mode of one level, through the access, direct access.
Thank you.
But what's your kind of take on it? I mean, I think the question was, what's your position? Do you like it? This is good or bad or what?
It's life.
So, okay, we have, what do we have? Yeah, the answer. Andriy, would you add?
Я би хотів сказати,
I would like to say that,
напевно, почну з того, що у нас
well,
дуже
I will
гарна
begin
назва
that we
панелі.
have a very nice
Meeting
name
Global
of the
Standards
panel.
in Ukrainian capital market infrastructure.
Meeting global standards for capital market infrastructure. So we don't need to invent our Ukrainian wheel, and we shouldn't head for our unique way because we are a unique nation and we have a very perspective market. Everything has already been invented before us. There are lots of developed financial markets, so we just need to take the standards which are working over there, taking into account where those markets are moving for, not where they used to be 10 or 15 years ago, and to implement it at our place. During 27 years of independence, our infrastructure of the capital market and the conditions under which it was created, we had lots of errors and mistakes and wrong understanding, taking into account again our so-called unique way and local unique standards. But maybe the only thing which was really done well is that from the very beginning we had the two-level depository system implemented, which is characteristic for the big developed markets, not for the smaller ones, which are authoritative countries, where everything should be under control and all of the risks are in the same basket. That is why, if we go along the way of the increase of all of the information at the level of the central depository, we will have a serious step back. But if we look at the European Union countries, bigger countries, the United States, and if we ask their custodians whether they want to give all of the accounts of their investors for the account of the central depository, the global depositories, I think that the best what they can do, they will just laugh in your face. Because this is their business, this is their field of competition. The National Bank, during the recent years, is using the philosophy that we want, in all of the spheres we are dealing with, we want to create an opportunity for competition and to go away from any monopolies. Let them be fixed at the level of legislation, and this is the biggest evil, and if they are not fixed either. So that's why we need to create opportunities everywhere for the market to develop. Because all of us understand that the market now is really in a bad state, and this is our weakness, but simultaneously this is our strength. Because sooner or later it will begin to grow, and rather quickly. Our infrastructure needs to be ready for that. It needs to be ready to provide foreign direct investment. The investments into the Ukrainian market will begin with the segment the National Bank is responsible for, and the depository I'm the head of, because this is the trigger for the foreign investors. If they can have access, free access and exit to the local of bonds, the next step could be the investments into the real sector and other tools of the market which will be developing. So, in fact, according to the latest statistical data, as far as I remember, 95% of all of the sales are the governmental bonds. The bonds, as for the depository of the National Bank, is the equivalent of $30 billion. All of the rest securities are approximately $2 billion.
необхідно,
So,
оскільки Національний банк, наша головна ціль – це цінова фінансова стабільність,
the new financial stability and sustainability with
то
the economic growth of Ukraine.
ми якраз дивимося на
We
розвиток
are looking at the
інфраструктури
development
з
of
точки зору
infrastructure from the
забезпечення
point of view
його ефективної
how to
роботи
provide
і
its
забезпечення
efficient and
фінансової
productive
стабільності.
work and to provide financial stability. Because
навіть
even
якщо зараз
if now
в структурі економіки
the
фондовий ринок
structure of
займає
economy
не таку велику частину,
doesn't
але
have the bigger share for the
кризи
capital
і
market,
неефективна
the
працююча
crisis and
інфраструктура
inefficient
все
working
одно буде
structure
шкодити всьому
will still harm
фінансовому ринку, в
the
першу чергу
whole
банківському
capital
ринку, тому
market.
що
First of
із
all,
тих
the
30
banking
мільярдів
market, because
половина
out of those
приблизно
30
належить
billion,
самому
the half
центральному
belongs
банку,
to the national bank
ще
itself.
приблизно
Approximately
30% належить
30% more belong
банкам.
to the
Приблизно там
banks.
70 банків з 82
It seems to me
існуючих.
approximately 70 banks out of 82 existing
ОВДП
ones.
це інструмент
So,
монетарної
internal
політики.
governmental bonds is this,
Тому
or domestic government bonds
ми
is the tool of a monetary
дивимося
policy.
на
That is
подальший
why
розвиток
we look at
інфраструктури
the further
з точки зору
development of
того,
the
щоб
infrastructure
ефективність,
to provide
надійність була
efficiency, reliability and
найпершою
credibility,
і
and for it
найважливішою
to be the first and
характеристикою, яку
foremost,
можна
the most
говорити про
important indicator
ринок і про нашу інфраструктуру,
which could
яка
characterize
забезпечує
our
обіг
market and
всіх
infrastructure
цінних
to
паперів, але
have
в
the
першу чергу
turnover of
державних.
all of the securities, but first of all, governmental ones or state
питання
ones.
про однорівневу чи
So
дворівневу
as for the one
систему,
level or two
я
level
думаю, що
system, your
треба
question, well, I
рухатись
should answer that maybe we should move
тим шляхом, який ми
in the
обрали
way we have
20 років
chosen
назад,
20 years
і
ago,
розвивати
and to
всі
develop
рівні
all
нашої
of the levels
інфраструктури.
of our
Не тільки
infrastructure, not only
біржі чи
the
центральні
stock
депозитарії
markets or the central
мають
depository
приводити свою діяльність до світових
have
стандартів. Це мають бути і
access
торгівці, і
and to
депозитарні
be
установи.
closer to
І
the
всі мають
international
бути
standards.
готові
All of the
до
traders and
моменту,
depository
коли
institutions must be ready to the
ми
moment when
включаємо новий
we, for instance, turn
програмний
on
продукт
the new
і
software,
починаємо жити в
set it
новому,
up,
в новій
and
реальності,
we
в
begin to
новому
live in the
ландшафті
new reality, in the new
нашої
landscape
депозитарної
of
системи.
our depository system.
Okay, thank you. So we could ask now Mindaugas about your preferences in depository system levels, because we see that Securities Commission, they say, okay, we have what we do have, and we live with the situation we have. The National Bank, I see, prefers a two-level system. And what is the point of central depository? And in this respect, what is the progress with your software installation, software testing, how you are going?
Well, first of all, I would like to reflect to what was said by Andriy, that we have to look to the other countries and select some best or standard way of doing things. But in essence, there is no universal standard. Every country has certain differences, certain nuances, and every market, as a result, is a little bit different. So there is no like detailed standard in the world at all. We are in different forms, often using this expression Ukrainian bicycle, but sometimes it's just not effective just doing copy-paste. We have to think with our heads and implement what is needed for our country at this given point of time. Coming back to the question of one level or two level, I would not probably share my preferences because it's not a competition who's better. But I will explain what we are planning to offer to the markets with the implementation of new system. And if I could have the presentation on the screen, I would like to illustrate the opportunities that our system, we using new system, will create. It is a bit unfortunate that the screen is a bit small, but we will find the presentation later on our site anyway. So what I want to say is that we will provide an option for a depository institution to select either two-level accounting system and work as they work today, opening accounts within their internal systems. And this is the schema that is on the left, looking from your side. In parallel, understanding the situation in Ukrainian market, where we have 200 custodians or depository institutions that are not very strong financially, and well, not all of them basically are strong financially, and not everyone will be able to acquire a new dedicated system for securities accounting. Because to perform the accounting of securities is actually take care of ownership. It's not just debit credit, on Excel. You cannot do it in Excel, in notes or whatever. You have to have a proper system that has all the processes implemented, like full audit trail, user control, and so on and so forth. So understanding that currently almost all depository institutions are working on the outdated system that depository will turn off. We are providing the option to use our future system and open accounts using our module. In a way, it will remain as it is today, because today we also are providing the securities accounting module to all depository institutions. Simply coming back to the reason why we are changing at all is to remind you that this legacy system has no proper documentation. It has a closed core. We can't develop it. We cannot be 100% sure that this system would continue working in 1 year or even on Monday morning, because we have limited opportunities to control it. So we have to turn it off, and we have to implement a state-of-the-art solution that we have selected. Therefore, completing the question about 1 or 2 level, the question is wrong, because it's all of the above.
Okay, let us imagine, that everything is function properly. Everything functions properly with the depository system. That the nominee holders law is implemented duly. Jan, in this case, let us assume everything is fine and you can enter the Ukrainian market. What would be the Clearstream's role?
Okay, thank you very much for this question. I will just briefly take a little step back and explain first a bit the philosophy that we have applied over the last years in this region, where we're standing now in our activities in Ukraine, and where we hope to get within the foreseeable future, and to give some advices as well to the participants here around the table to make that possible. I mean, Clearstream, together with Euroclear in Brussels, we have a long tradition of, we have our origins basically in the Eurobond world more than 50 years ago, whereby the entire capital market looked for a unique and single entry point for international securities. And that's how we basically developed over the last 40 years as a hub for the Eurobond world. And over the years, the same platform and the same technology has been used for linking in other major capital markets to the ICSD systems. And the ICSD systems have been proven to be a very stable, solid infrastructure for domestic markets, whereby global investors could bypass the complexities of local markets by consolidating into an ICSD and, importantly, creating also a functional secondary market for international instruments. So we basically, more by luck than by option, over the years we started to behave like a global custodian in that sense, and have developed a network of over 58 markets where the local securities can be settled and safe-kept within an ICSD. I mean, I don't need to explain what happened with the Russian capital markets when the ICSDs entered in 2012, 2013, whereby thanks to a lot of developments that the Russian Central Security Depository took, and which now in some way or another are being replicated in Ukraine as well, it meant that basically from a 2 to 3% non-resident holding of OFZs over 2 to 3 years for entering the Russian markets, especially for government debts, became so easy that they at a certain moment had achieved the 35% non-resident holders of foreign of OFZs. I think these are figures right now where here in Ukraine we can only dream of, but that did not fall out of the sky. Of course, the appeal of the instrument in itself achieved that, but instrumental was the way how foreign investors could enter, and there we have done our part as well. So we did a lot of lobbying with the MOEX group, with the National Bank, with the mega regulator, to make sure that, and I think you made a very good comment at the beginning, Ukraine is either in or out. There is a ample choice for emerging and frontier market investors to put their money somewhere. So it is the sexiest bride that will have that will be asked, that will get the money. And the instrument may be as attractive as it be. If getting through the door is so complex, then the investor will move to another bride. When we did our exercise in Russia, and basically the project was done, we had gained the knowledge, the resources, the concepts, and then we looked at the wider CIS region and thought, like, why don't we just test if what we did in Russia, we could do it in some of the peripheral states as well? Because with the conversations that we had with investment managers, this is the same guys who sit on a Russian trading desk that would do Kazakhstan, Ukraine, some of the Caucasian regions. So they knocked on our door and said, look, thank you very much, Clearstream, for getting me access for OFZs, but would you have the possibility to look at this and this and this peripheral Russia CIS market as well? Then we test-cased our concept that we had in mind with two very small capital markets, being Armenia and Georgia. We went there to the local regulators. They were very enthusiastic about what we wanted to do with them, because it would make a big appeal for their local markets. And their markets are small, but because they were small, we could basically use them as a guinea pig for a concept that we wanted to apply later on here in Ukraine as well. So we came basically with a wish list to the Georgian and the Armenian regulators, central bank, stock exchange, whereby we said, look, if you are able to achieve, and this whole concept that we discussed here around the table already, things like an omnibus concept, a free transferability of shares, a very flexible tax regime for non-resident investors, for a nominee concept, and so on and so on, then we may try to hook on your local markets onto the Clearstream system. And they said to us, look, give us some time. We're going to our parliament, we're going to our regulators, and we'll talk again within a year. And both markets basically have achieved what we asked them to do, which meant that in 2016 we have been able to hook on the Georgian and the Armenian fixed income markets onto the Clearstream system. For Armenia, so local currency in dram, government bonds. In Georgia, the same thing for lari, and now we added since a couple of weeks also Georgian corporate bonds onto our offering for our clients, which meant that those niche investors that wanted to enter those markets, they can basically bypass the local market and offload the local counterparty and the local custody risk onto a Luxembourgish-based AA-rated market infrastructure. So this is a win-win for everyone. Then, of course, those markets are what they are. They are the two bigger ones in the region that would have that will complete our Russia CSS offering, which is Kazakhstan and Ukraine. So we, at the same period, I mean, also when in one of the panels this morning, we heard it from an investment point of view. Not every emerging market is the same. They're all distinct in their own way. This applies for the investment appeal in the products. This applies as well for the market infrastructure. There are certain markets in this region which have a post-trade market infrastructure which is very, very similar to European best practices. The other ones that deviate quite a lot. So we had to work with each market individual, and the template that works in one does not work in the other. With our Kazakh counterparts, we've done the work. So we have added tenge-denominated government bonds and national banknotes to the Clearstream offering since end of July of this year. And we are in very far advanced stages here in Ukraine as well. I mean, we went already quite public on a couple of conferences and in one-on-one meetings with investors, saying that look, there's a commitment from Clearstream to make hryvnia-denominated government bonds Clearstreamable. We had envisaged to do this year. However, the turmoil on emerging markets made us decide to wait a little bit, and there are still some open questions to the regulators here, central bank and others. Stakeholders, especially on the cash side and the cash clearing here within Ukraine. Certain aspects of what was capital controls still have to have a bit of a bigger deep dive from our side to be sure that we can launch a product that is solid for our clients or stakeholders, and is also approved by our regulators. Because, and I think it's very important here, going back, are you in, are you out? There's a bit, I think, the gentlemen at this table who have done this journey with us will agree that 3-4 years we were in that naivety that, okay, making the Ukraine market Clearstreamable is just a matter of opening correspondent accounts, throwing a SWIFT onto it, and it's a done deal. It's a much more complex exercise, which goes in parallel with everything that happens in the European Union on regulation sides. Basically, the post-trade industry, as we know it, is only now implementing some of the measures that are the result of the 2008 financial crisis. There's a big one in the European Union, it's called CSDR, is a central Securities Depository regulation, which is basically completely reshaping the way how CSDs and ICSDs in Europe can function. So what we are doing here in Ukraine, with all the complexity and the challenges that your market has, have to be rubber stamped against the CSDR regulation. So that's why you are in a very lucky position with the reforms that you're doing in the post-trade. I would really encourage you to have a good deep dive in what CSDR means, and make sure that whenever your integration within the European Union goes ahead, that you can tick off that box as well. And we understand sometimes the frustration from both the local stakeholders, but also the international investors about the slow pace in which our project goes, but we have an end goal in mind. I mean, we hope Q1 2019 to have really ticked off all the boxes. But do understand that regulators are following literally each activity that we intend to do in this market. And that's also good. That's just in the benefit of your markets. We want to go back to the investment community saying, we build for you an entry point in Ukraine, which is sound, which follows to the maximum extent European regulators. So you can go back to your risk guys saying, I want to increase my exposure to Ukraine government bonds through Clearstream, and I can prove you that they have done all the work to offload a maximum of local market and local counterparty risks onto a Luxembourg-based ICSD, and they are in line with all necessary European regulation. So that's basically the end goal. On the other side, on the discussion here, we are neutral towards any decision how the market will end when it comes to their depositories. In a lot of European countries, there are 2 depositories that are functioning. I'm from Belgium myself. In my home country, the National Bank of Belgium deals with the government securities. The Euroclear Group, CSD, deals with any corporate bond and equity securities. It all functions. What is important for us is, and then going back to the regulatory issues, is whoever becomes a main CSD needs to have a very decent capitalization, whereby we can go back to a regulator saying, look, we have chosen to hook up onto that market directly, because that's important as well. Our regulators ask us to go as close as possible in foreign countries to the market infrastructure, but we can only do that if we can guarantee them that we trust that CSD, that we know them, and that their balance sheet is a bit stronger than a paper napkin. So this is, for the rest, we stay away from those discussions. We give our advice, and basically the advices are very simple and are not that difficult to implement.
Okay, thank you. So we shall keep going and we shall watch what's going on in the European Union in order to harmonize our legislation with it. Andriy, I understand that the National Bank of Ukraine have implemented some novelties in settlement models with the sovereign securities as well. Would you please maybe address the question? Would you please tell us?
Okay.
I maybe will begin from the very beginning. I'm almost working at the National Bank for 3 years, and in spite of, well, maybe a bit speaking a bit ahead, answering your questions about the creation of the unified central depository, I can answer you instantly. The plans of the National Bank as for the creation of the unified central depository and giving the securities into the depository haven't changed. But the question is not connected with any terms and timelines. It's connected only with the stability and efficiency of the work of the central depository. So when the National Bank is able to be sure that the quality of the functioning of the turnover of the security in no way is worsening and maybe even improving, then we will never postpone this decision. We are working on that. As it was mentioned by Dmytro today, 2 years ago, we had the common meeting with the colleagues and with the support of the EBRD project on the selection of an optimal model of infrastructure. The company of Oliver Wyman was the vendor, and it conducted the serious research. According to this result, last summer, there was the memorandum signed between the National Bank and the Commission on the Securities. As for the implementation of this model, and 2 months ago, to strengthen all of those agreements, we had full of sense technical mission of IMF, which also gave its own recommendations as for the implementation of the reforms of the infrastructure of capital market. So, having those 2 research as the basis and kind of recommendations, we are moving along in the direction of the new infrastructure. Very soon, we'll give to the Parliament the law draft, a small one, which would allow, in case it's adopted, to issue the main changes of the infrastructure as for the calculation center. And it will also include those comfort factors which would allow us, after the achieving of all of the technical conditions from the central depository, to take a decision about the transferring of the national and state securities. One of the factors
дуже наполегливо
which
рекомендований
was really
нам МВФ,
recommended
це
by
те,
the
що Національний
IMF,
банк не має
is that the national
відхрещуватись
bank
від
shouldn't
інфраструктури
go
фондового
away
ринку,
from the
тому що
infrastructure of the capital
ця
market
інфраструктура є
because
критично
this
важливою для
infrastructure is
забезпечення
critically
фінансової
important to
стабільності.
provide financial stability.
І наша роль в цій
And
інфраструктурі
our
має
role in
бути
this
досить
infrastructure
вагома.
should be rather substantial.
Звичайно,
Well,
головний
of course,
регулятор на
the
цьому
main
ринку – це комісія з
regulator
цінних
at this
паперів,
market is the
але
National
їх
Securities
мандат – це
Commission,
захист прав інвесторів,
but their
а
mandate
ми, як
is
вторинний регулятор,
to protect the rights of the
який має
investors, and
забезпечити
we are
саме
the
фінансову
secondary
стабільність.
regulator which
І
has
з
to
точки
provide
зору
financial
центрального
stability. From the point of view
депозитарію
of
і
the
центрального
central depository
контрагента, в
and the
разі,
central
якщо
counter agent,
cost-benefit-аналіз,
in
про який
case
Дмитро
if the
згадував,
cost-benefit analysis
покаже,
Dmytro has
що
mentioned that it will show
така інституція в Україні
that
потрібна,
this institution is needed in Ukraine,
то доля
then
Національного банку в
the
капіталі
fate of
має
the
бути
share of
принаймні
the national
51%.
bank in the capital should be at
Досить
least
серйозне представництво в
51%.
наглядовій раді має
The
бути у
serious
Національного банку.
representation of the
І ще
national bank should
нова
be in the
функція, про
supervisory board. And
яку
one more
раніше ми
function,
не
which
згадували,
we
не
never
було в нас
mentioned
планів
above
по
and
її
we never had plans
розвитку,
on its
це
development,
оверсайт.
is the oversight.
Цей закон також буде
This law
містити ці
will
положення,
also include those
тому що
provisions because
згідно
according to
європейських
the
директив,
European directives,
саме Центральний банк
the central
має
bank itself
забезпечувати
has to
оверсайт
provide the
за
oversight
інфраструктурою
on
фінансового
the
ринку.
infrastructure
І
of
це не
the
тільки
financial
платіжні
market.
системи,
And
оверсайт
those are
яких
not
ми вже
only payment
здійснюємо,
systems
це
we are
і
conducting
інші
oversight of,
чотири
those are
елементи
all the
інфраструктури:
other
центральний
four elements
депозитарій,
of the
системи
infrastructure, the central
розрахунків за
depository,
цінними
the
паперами,
calculation system of the
центральні
securities, the
контрагенти
central
і
counter
торгові
agents,
репозиторії,
and
якщо вони
the
існують.
trade
Це 5
repositories if
елементів,
they
оверсайт
exist.
за
Those
якими
are
має
5 elements
забезпечувати Центральний банк.
the central bank
І
has to
поки що
provide
Центральний
oversight
банк
of.
історично
So far, according to the
на нього
legend, the
була
central
покладена
bank
функція
had the
оверсайту
function
тільки
of
за
oversight
платіжними
of
системами.
only the payment
Але ця
systems.
функція найближчим
But
часом,
this
після
system
внесення змін
soon,
і
after the
розширення наших
amendments
повноважень за
introduced
законом,
and
буде
expanding
розвиватися.
of our authorities,
Але
will be
підготовка у нас
developing
вже
more.
ведеться.
Though
І
we're
от
having
ці
the
фактори
preparation stage
дозволять
already,
нам
and those factors will allow
з
us
різних боків
from different
мати,
sides to have,
скажімо так,
I'd
вплив
say,
на
impact
і пересвідчувати, що функціонування центрального депозитарію
on the functioning of the
здійснюється
central
належним чином.
depository, which should
І
be
от саме
done
за
in an
таких умов
appropriate way.
рішення про передачу ОВДП буде
So then,
прийняти значно
this decision
простіше і швидше.
to
З
transfer
точки зору нашого розвитку,
the government bonds will be much easier.
ми пройшли досить за
As
ці
for
3
our
роки пройшли
development,
досить
during those 3
серйозний
years,
шлях,
we had a very
незважаючи на те, що
serious
плани
way, in
глобальні по
spite of the
передачі
global plans
ОВДП,
on the
вони на
transfer
столі,
of
як кажуть,
domestic government
але
bonds are
це не
on the
означає,
way.
що ми
It
маємо
does not
сидіти і
mean that we
чекати цього
shouldn't
моменту,
sit and
нічого
wait
не
for this
роблячи.
moment without doing
Як я вже
anything.
казав,
As I already mentioned,
наша філософія
Our
це створення
philosophy is the
можливостей.
creation of opportunities.
Тому
That is why
і ми почали розвиватися саме
began
в
to
цьому
develop
напрямку.
ourselves in this
Минулого
direction.
року вперше
Last
за все
year,
існування
For the first time
державних
of
цінних
the
паперів,
history of the
ми
national
офіційно
securities,
і прозоро
we officially and
дозволили виконувати
transparently
операції
allowed
по принципу поставка без
to
оплати,
conduct
free
the
of payment.
transactions which were free of payment.
Ми відродили
We
технологію
renewed or
так
gave
званих
birth to
амперсантів.
the
Ну, фактично, це
ampersand
розрахунки
technology,
в грошах Центрального банку, які забезпечуються засобами нашої системи електронних платежів. І дали можливість учасникам ринку проводити операції оплати проти поставки, тому що поставка проти оплати згідно закону це монопольна функція розрахункового центру. Чим створили можливість для того, щоб розрахунковий центр з монополіста, створеного нормою закону, перетворився на ринкову компанію, яка має виборювати своє місце і доводити учасникам ринку, навіщо вона їм потрібна, і покращувати свої сервіси, вдосконалювати свої тарифи, програмні продукти, щоб давати додаткову вартість учасникам і в конкурентних умовах виборювати право на те, щоб існувати і розвиватись. Крім того, ми зробили прозоре регулювання депозитарію. Раніше в наших купі регуляцій дуже важко було знайти сенс. Ми спробували це все створити в одному документі, структуруючи його
in the one
орієнтуючись
document,
на
structuring
типи
it,
клієнтів
and
і
focusing
типи
upon the types of
послуг, які ми
clients
їм
and
надаємо.
types of
Тому що в
services
даному
we are
випадку
providing.
Національний банк
Because
виступає
in this
більше не як
case, the
регулятор,
National
а як
Bank is not
сервісна
a
компанія,
regulator,
яка
but a
надає
service
послуги
company which provides
депозитарним
services
установам
to the
і іншим
depository
учасникам
institutions
фондового
and
ринку.
other participants of the capital market.
Потім наступний крок був
The
це
next step was
створення
the creation
прозорих і
of
справедливих
transparent and fair
тарифів на
tariffs
послуги
for
депозитарію
the
Національного
services
банку,
of the
які
depository of the
не
National Bank,
змінювались
which have never
14
changed for
років.
14 years.
Незважаючи на те, що
In
ринок
spite of
змінився
the
дуже
changes in
дуже
the
сильно
market,
за
rather
цей період.
substantial changes during these periods.
І тарифи знову таки
the
дуже
tariffs,
важко
again,
це
were
рішення
not
було
that
проводити, тому що
easy
основний
to
тариф
change
був
because the
в
main
6
tariff
разів
was 6
зменшений,
times less,
що дивно, в принципі, чути,
which was weird to
коли
hear
все скрізь
when
тарифи зростають,
everything,
підвищуються,
where the
Національний
tariffs
банк
are
раптом
increasing
знизив
everywhere,
тарифи.
suddenly the National Bank
Ідеологія
decided to
була в тому,
decrease
що
the
платити
tariffs.
має
The
той,
ideology was the
хто
following.
отримує послуги.
The one who gets
Хто
the services will pay.
проводить більше транзакцій,
Who
той
conducts more
платить за кожну
transactions,
транзакцію. Хто
he or she is paying for each
має
transaction.
більшу
Whoever
вартість
has
портфелю,
the higher value
він
of the
платить за
portfolio,
вартість портфелю,
he or
а
she
не
is
за
paying for
кількість
the
штук,
price of the portfolio,
як
not
це
for the
обраховувалось раніше,
number of
не
points
зважаючи
as it was
ані
calculated
номінал,
before,
ані
without looking at
дисконтну
the
вартість,
discount price
дисконтовану.
or the
І
nominal or face
тарифи
value.
були сконструйовані там в
So the
90-х
tariffs were
роках
constructed
під
during the 90s.
один інструмент, який
For
тоді
one
обслуговував
tool, which
депозитарій,
were
це
served
гривневий,
by the depository, that was
ОВДП,
Hryvnia Institute. And
які
governmental
завжди
domestic
мали
bonds, which
номінал
always
1000
had
гривень.
the face
І
value of
жодним чином це не
1000
змінювалося.
hryvnia. And it has never changed
Останні
since
зміни, які
that
от
time.
буквально позавчора
The latest
були
changes, which were
опубліковані,
published the
напевно,
day before
багато з вас
yesterday, and
бачили
I guess lots
прес-реліз,
of you have seen the press release,
знову таки налаштовані на те, щоб створити
again want to
певні
create
і покращити певні
certain
можливості для
improvements of
учасників ринку. В
opportunities for
першу
the
чергу,
participants of the market. First of all,
ми спростили
we simplified
для нерезидентів
for the
можливість
non-residents the opportunity
репатріювати свої доходи,
to
отримані від
repatriate
ОВДП.
their revenues
В
and
частині,
profits out of
у
domestic
випадку, якщо вони
governmental
продають
bonds.
ОВДП
If
на
they are
локальному
selling
ринку,
those bonds at the
локальному
local
інвестору.
market to the
Ми
local
фактично
investor,
прибрали
we
валютний
in
контроль
fact took
по
away
цим
the currency
операціям.
control and oversight on those
Це був
operations and transactions.
компроміс,
But it was a
тому що
compromise because
для того, щоб бути в комфорті
to
і
feel
щоб цей інструмент не
comfort and for this
використовувався
tool
для
not to be used
витоку капіталу,
for the
ми додали певні
outflow of the
обмеження,
capital, we
коли
added certain
нерезидент
restrictions
на етапі
when the
купівлі цінних
non-residents at
паперів
the stage of
має їх
the
купувати або через
buying
біржу,
of
де є
the
розрахунки поставка
securities
проти
has to
оплати,
buy it through the stock
і є
market,
певне ціноутворення.
and there is
А
the
якщо він
certain
хоче
pricing.
розраховуватись по принципу
if he
поставка
want
без
to
оплати,
pay
то
according to
його
the different
контрагентом має
principle, then
бути
his
виключно
counteragent
банк.
has to be a
Ми
bank
розуміємо, що
only.
банківська
We do
система
understand
зараз вже
that the banking
очищена,
system
і
is a bit
ми можемо довіряти тим банкам, які
cleaner than it
існують,
used to be,
і
so we
вони
can trust
не
the
будуть
existing banks.
займатися
They
фіктивними
will never do
угодами
fake
з ОВДП з
contracts
нерезидентами.
with
Тому
involving
от в цьому
the
випадку
government bonds with
жодним чином
non-residents.
доводити,
In this
як
case,
ти вводив валюту сюди, де
you
ти
shouldn't
придбавав
prove
цінні
how you
папери для того,
input
щоб
the
потім
the currency
купити
here,
валюту і
where
вивести
did
її
you
туди,
bought the
в країну,
securities,
звідки нерезидент походить, більше
and
немає.
how you take it to the country of the origin
це
of the non-resident.
Плюс
It shouldn't be done
друга
anymore.
частина,
This is the achievement
теж
or
на
the
яку, напевно,
dignity.
дуже очікувалися,
The
і вже
second
Дмитро
part, which was
анонсував, це
expected, and
брокерські
Dmytro has
заявки
announced
на
it already.
первинному ринку.
Those are the
Фактично вже
brokers'
з
announcements at the
понеділка, на
primary market
наступному
since
тижні,
Monday next week.
вчора вже у нас
And
мені
even yesterday,
повідомили, що
I
оновлення
had
програмного
a
забезпечення
message
успішно було
that
всім поставлено.
The
І
update of
фактично
the software
наступні
was set
аукціони
up.
можуть вже проходити з
So the next auctions
можливістю
can be
будь-якого
held with an
інвестора подавати
opportunity
свої
of any
заявки
investor
Міністерству
to give
фінансів
the applications
через
to the Ministry of Finance
первинних
through
дилерів.
the primary
Я думаю,
dealers.
що це
I do
має
hope that it
дещо
will
покращити
improve
ситуацію
the
з
situation where
залученням
the involvement
фінансів у
of the finance
населення в першу чергу.
from the population,
Хоча
first of
це
all, though
знову таки планів у нас ще дуже
we've
багато.
got lots of
І
plans
я
left.
думаю, що вже там
And I do
наступного
hope
року,
that next
на
year,
початку року,
In the
можливо,
beginning of the year, maybe,
купівля фізичними особами ОВДП зможе відбуватися в декілька кліків в мобільних додатках. Одразу декілька учасників ринку зараз працюють над створенням такого рішення, і ми зі свого боку намагаємося їм також надавати всю підтримку, пишемо відкрите API і даємо можливість будь-кому включитись в цю конкуренцію і надавати послуги ринку, тому що насправді ми знаємо, що в наш час є така системна проблема по всьому світі, але особливо в Україні різко представлена це криза довіри. Ніхто нікому не довіряє, а особливо ніхто не довіряє державі і державним інституціям. Інвестиції фізичних осіб в внутрішні гривневі ОВДП – це ситуація він-він. Держава отримує ресурс, а фізична особа отримує хороший відсоток, майже неоподаткований, на відміну від депозитів, і 100% державні гарантії на будь-яку суму. Якщо цей продукт стане дійсно популярним, це, на мою думку, певний крок до того, щоб довіра між нашими громадянами і державою почала покращуватись.
Mindaugas has some comments to the first part of your speech. Yeah, Mindaugas?
Yeah, basically, well, thank you for a good overview of capital market. But coming back to a specific CSD related part and post-trade, you, Andriy, touched the timing question, and you correctly said that there is no deadline set by yourself or in some law, except of obviously Program 2020, but this is related, correctly related with our project. That's obviously transferring the service of government bonds to National Depository of Ukraine requires trust in that system and product. So I would try to put in the perspective of time how our project is running and when we can foresee this might happen. So regarding our project that we are currently running, i.e. the replacement of our CSD system, we started preparation in December last year. In the May, I will remind you, we signed a contract with the developer company Percival to implement a product called Depend, which is proven in a number of countries, including Armenia. Right now, we are in the first phase. The project is a three-phase project. First phase will be finished in November, when we will receive the first delivery of the platform, which is developed for Ukraine, or adjusted basically for Ukraine. And we will internally within the CSD start intensive testing throughout actually the whole time until it's launched. The second phase is delivery of already final functionality or complete functionality product in April next year. So until April, we will be testing core functionality for CSD platform. After April, we will continue testing additional functions like servicing corporate actions and integration into different systems, including clearing or settlement center, and hopefully a payment system of National Bank, at least in the testing environment. And in our plans, we want to start market-wide testing officially in June next year. So until then, obviously, the onboarding process of all the CSDs, CSD participants or the depository institutions to test environments so that they could start testing and configuring their internal systems if they need to. Then the most important stage is acceptance test, which will be run in the middle of July next year, and planned launch of the new system and new business model is set currently now planned August 5th, 2019. So obviously, within that process, we will be focusing on our main products and services which are run today in CSD, i.e. the corporate instruments, the company's shares and corporate bonds. But we will in parallel we will try testing with National Bank of Ukraine all the processes that are related with government bonds. And hopefully by the end of 2019 we should answer all the questions. We should have enough time to make additional developments if National Bank would require, and clearly set these requirements on the paper so that it will not become a continuous back and forth discussion without an end. So in a way, our goal is to be ready to do it for 2020, technically. And everything will depend on, obviously, legal environment and political will from National Bank. To add what next, as a CSD, we already heard in many panels the word trust or the lack of trust. And we as a CSD understanding that we provide a crucial service to whole market. We are a systematically important institution in the country. Therefore, we are focusing on building the trust. We have invested heavily and we will continue investing a lot into IT infrastructure. We currently have 2 separate data centers set in around the Kyiv. We implemented cloud technology to be flexible in balancing our performance, to run the systems without any risk of failure or various attacks like we remember Petya happened. So we invest a lot in cybersecurity so that market participants would trust. We bought a proven CSD platform so that it will be something that you will be able to trust. And obviously we are aiming to become a platform as an infrastructure for you, for market participants. So you could come to us if you want and ask for help, for assistance to create new products for you, new products and services, because we are aiming to build that trust. We have capacity to do it. We have sufficient financial resources. We're not dependent on any donors or anything. And obviously we have the best people in the market within our company. So we have a clear vision where we want to arrive.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, я хотів би 2 слова, якщо можна,
I'd like to say a couple of words
тему
too
build trust,
about
тому що я
the
розумію,
building
що ми
of
зараз
trust, because as far as I
закінчується час, і ми
understand, we're
перейдемо
almost
до
short
режиму
of time,
питань-відповідей.
and we'll come to the Q&A
2
session
коротких
soon.
ремарки
2
щодо
short remarks as
ринку
for
ВДП. Звичайно, ми
governmental
підтримуємо тут і
bonds
Міністерство
markets. Of
фінансів,
course,
і
we do
Національний
support the
банк для
Ministry
того,
of
щоб
Finance
цей
and
ринок
National Bank for
розвивались.
this market to be developed.
Як я сказав,
As
що
far as I
дійсно,
understand, as I mentioned,
згадував Андрій те, що
and
ми
as
зараз
Andriy
працюємо на те,
mentioned,
щоб дати
we
можливість
are
банкам запустити цю послугу через
working to let the banks
мобільні
issue this service through the mobile apps.
І це все з одної сторони так,
All of that
з
on
іншої
the one
сторони
side is okay, but on the
ми
other
будемо
hand,
допомагати ринку
we will
build цей траст з
support
точки
the
зору нагляду за
market
цим
to
ринком.
build this
Ми би не
trust,
хотіли, щоб
controlling
через
or
мобільний
oversighting this
application це
market.
був
We
легкий
wouldn't like
спосіб,
to make
скажімо
it an
так,
easy way
нечесно поводитися з роздрібними клієнтами. Тобто питання best execution і найкращої ціни буде дуже актуальне. Я сподіваюся, що ту роботу, яку ми зробили і робимо разом із Міністерством, з Національним банком щодо створення ринку маркетмейкерів в облігаціях, я сподіваюся, що ми отримаємо більш прозорий ринок і більш чіткішу криву, і ми будемо дуже пильно слідкувати, щоб банки давали можливість клієнтам, по-перше, по цим цінам виконувалися заявки. Ці заявки, які, якщо банк не може виконати по найкращій ціні сам, він повинен буде пропускати в ринок. І це питання принципове. Зараз дуже важливо, щоб ми на берегу, як кажуть, поки цей процес не набрав великої масовості, щоб ми чітко розуміли відповідальність, яку ми всі будемо мати як елементи інфраструктури і регулятори за те, щоб цей ринок запрацював правильно, а не щоб це не був масовий механізм ошукування людей. Це перше. Друге, з однієї сторони, розвиток цього ринку є win-win, але він не зовсім є win-win, тому що якщо гроші переходять із депозиту банку на фінансування дефіциту бюджету держави по ставках 18,5, то це не є win-win. Це значить, що банки будуть мати менше ресурсів для кредитування, і в момент, коли економіка все-таки буде потребувати ці ресурси, було би добре, щоб це впливало на нижчу ставку вартості грошей, і економіка могла отримувати дешевший ресурс. Але я сподіваюся, що масштаби, про які ми говоримо зараз, поки що не є критичними. І дійсно створення альтернативи до банківського депозиту – це дуже корисний процес для того, щоб і населення отримувало освіту. І я сподіваюся, що це буде необхідний процес для подальшого розвитку ринку капіталу, щоб люди мали контакт з ринком, коли там з'являться нові продукти. Сподіваюся, що в нас з'являться все-таки місцеві IPO, можливо, з'являться інші продукти. Було б добре, щоб населення було освічене і могло працювати з цими продуктами.
It was our bell for Q&A session, so the audience is welcome to address questions to our panelists, if any.
Alexei Key, Association Part.
Alexei Key, Association Part. I've got two questions to Dmytro and to Mindaugas. Dmytro, the concept of the reforms of the infrastructure is not over yet. So far, we haven't seen its publishing. So don't you think that the national depositor buying the program product is a bit too early? We will be the hostages of this software product about its implementation into our legislation. Well, it's the same to say whether we are the hostages of people buying Tesla because we need to equip the country with the charges of Tesla, of electrocars. People, let us try to
Це є дуже прогресивний проєкт. Мені здається, Mindaugas дуже чітко пояснив, чому їхати на старому возі ми далі не можемо. І, на жаль, цей проєкт відбувається із запізненням, він мав відбутися кілька років тому. Тому ставити під сумнів взагалі цей проєкт, я вважаю, що це...
Well, I'm not in doubt, but the concept is developed long ago. It has been developed, and we were speaking about the work which has been done by Oliver Wyman.
Там розписаний, у нас розписаний з Національним банком, є підписаний меморандум.
The memorandum signed with the National Bank. But has the Commission adopted the concept? Sure. Then I have a different question to Mindaugas. You've mentioned that you would need approximately 2 years to transform the software. How much time do you plan to use for the custody who would want to or want already to work using modern software but their own software? How much time do we need for their start and how much time do you need to connect with your product? I will speak Russian if you don't mind. So I'm planning to begin in August next year. So to have an official procedure of testing, and in case if the institutions are using their own software, time up till the beginning of July next year. This is the time which is given to the institutions which are choosing the option of their own software or developing of their own software or buying their own software, to have enough time to set it up, to test it according to our technical requirements, which will be published during the next week, and to begin the process of testing and certification for the work in the new system. For those institutions, depository institutions, which select not to buy or develop their own software, in fact, nothing would change. We will create the preparatory works for the migration of all of the data from the older Oberon systems into the new ones. We will prepare everything, all of the needed things, I mean the systems and the users and the connections, for those depository institutions to be able to test them on the 1st of June, or maybe even a bit earlier. So half of the year, well, going on with my answer, I could remind you that the choice of the model used by the depository institution is not forever. It's not one and forever. Both technologically and judicially, there won't be any obstacles to choose a problem without your own software, to develop your own software, for instance, for 2020, and then to migrate onto your own software as much as you want, according to the requirements of the regulators. And the clients, of course. Good afternoon. I am the representative of the Calculation or Audit Center. It's very pleasant that you mentioned about us and about our intentions, but I've got several questions for Dmytro. We presented the system of accounting, a new central depository, which foresaw the opportunity to open accounts at the level of the central depository. In your opinion, what do you say? Whether it's correspondent to the current law of the depository system, or it's done for the new law draft? What are your plans as for the amendments of the regulations of the commissions which would allow to implement this choice? And do you consider that, taking account our discussion, that in fact we have only half of the year left, and we need to have a bit of feasible terms of the exploitation, for at least to begin from the moment of the factual interface requirements and other components for the participants to develop their own software? Why am I asking that? Because we do remember the cases of the securities in the register system. So for us not to have the similar failure in the system of the central depository. In summer this year, we are functioning as Mindaugas offers, and we are getting the court decisions, which are still not reformed, with the securities, not with the depository institution, which tries to protect the owner's rights, but from the account of an end owner from the central depository. Thank you. First of all, look, there is such a notion in the project management to postpone the terms of the project the postponing can happen anytime. Whatever I do, whatever I implement, it's not that complicated to say, I will not do that tomorrow, I will do that in a week. It's much harder to be on time, so I think we shouldn't have the discussions about postponing any terms, honestly. I think that we should work for the aim, which is already established, for us to be able to have an end of summer, to be ready and to function in different mode. Secondly, I do understand what you're meaning. Well, of course, the new ecosystem, if I may say so, should be totally correspondent to the legislation and the law. There can't be a single question about that. There can't be any discussions about that. That is why everything which needed to be done from the Commission will be done. As for the legislation and regulations, if we have any collisions with the law, we'll have to respond, to react. If somehow it happens that some functions are not able to be implemented in this legislation framework without the amendments to the laws, they won't work without those amendments. Of course, this is the only option. As far as you understand, the fact that we look at the information and took it to the top level of the depository, still the access to the depository will be held only by the depository institutions. They will be still the agents on the clients serving and providing services to the clients. So to oppose any attempts to provide changes of the title would be very hard. I think that, especially if the depository institution is totally correspondent to the requirements of the legislation, to have our license, then I consider that we have to be very principle. Thank you. Well, Vyachslav Sechinsky from Citibank. In fact, this is more of a remark and feedback from the active participant of the market. We are, as a primary dealer on the bonds, according to the ranking of the Ministry of Finance, we're taking the first place. So I'd like to say that the thing which has been done by the National Bank really deserves a great credit. I'd like to say thank you so much. That the work of the non-residents is simplified finally. And the focus and commitment we'll see and the speed of the response and reaction is really cool.
Clearstream, who would like to add Ukraine to the global platform, so Ukraine will be just another tick in the global list, and the level of interest to Ukraine so far is not so high, but since the beginning of the year, we managed to bring to the country around like $400 million. Now they live in the country, but it's another story. And we hope that probably in the future this amount will be much higher.
If we look at the structure of the existing market, non-residents with the current 7 billion of hryvnia is 1% of an overall debt. The private persons with their 5 billion hryvnia is less than 1% of the market. If we look at the neighboring countries and look at the 20%, 15%, we have a huge catch-up so far. And the last remark, what we discussed yesterday with Timur, really, to develop the market, which would be accessible for the Ukrainians, for the citizens, for them to buy the bonds and to get this tax benefit in comparison with the deposits, we really need a very precise price discovery mechanism. So we, as primary dealers, I think we'll have a separate meeting in the Ministry of Finance for us to define the benchmark bonds, according to which we'll meet every day, for it to be accessible both for the local market, and there are certain technical details. We are more created for the non-residents market. They're not looking at the stock markets. It's much easier for them to look at Bloomberg or any other terminal quotations. So if there is an opportunity to unite those feeds from Bloomberg to the stock market, then it would be just perfect. This is my only feedback. I never criticized anyone. I just praised everyone.
Ми не проти об'єктивної критики.
No, we don't mind if you
Я можу
criticize. It's
про
okay.
Bloomberg сказати,
I can say
далі
about
буде.
Bloomberg to be
Обід це святе,
continued.
але ще одне питання.
Yes, the lunch is sacred, but one more question. Raiffeisen Bank Kaval, good afternoon. The question about the private people. As you said, private persons, you said that we know that there is 1.5% military, this military kind of investment. So you have to go to the declaration. So do you think maybe we should initiate, because the market will support it, to cancel those 2 points for the private persons? It would be substantial.
Подали свої предложення
We
по
gave our
упразднению этих
suggestions
двух
as for the
моментов
cancellation
еще
of those 2 points
года
and
назад
provisions about a year ago to the Ministry
бюджетный
Finance.
процесс,
The budget
принятие
process, as for the
изменений в налоговый
commissions and
кодекс, и мы
fees,
надеемся, что это попадет в пул,
considers
что
the
Минфин
amendments
нас в
to the
этом поддержит.
tax code. We do hope that the Ministry of Finance will support us. Then another question about the direct access of the Ministry of Finance. As for the hryvnia, we don't have any questions. We have all of that done. But if it's a foreign currency, do you have any restrictions that the client, according to the contract, can give the currency directly to our transit account? And we could pay this foreign currency to the Ministry of
Именно
Finance.
так оно и должно работать.
Well, it should work. So you don't have any restrictions about that? No, we don't. Thank you.
Okay, let me thank our speakers. We have to finish, but we also could continue our discussion if you would like. The topics we didn't discuss is the settlement center and its non-functioning as a banking institution, because the memorandum between the National Securities Commission and National Bank says strictly that settlement center shall not act as a banking institution. If you are interested in it, and for the depository system, I know that there are many questions or many ideas of how to make a proper investment abroad via the central depository. So we have discussed the investment into Ukraine, but there is also an issue of investment abroad.
До речі, так, закон про неміні,
By the
згадайте, що
way,
він є
it's
зеркальний.
true. Do not
Він
forget
дозволяє,
that this
він дає
law is a kind
можливість
of a mirror law.
іноземцям
It gives an
бути
opportunity
номіні
for
тут,
the foreigners to be
і він дає
nominees
можливість
here,
нашим
and it
депозитарним
gives an
установам
opportunity
бути
for
номіні
our
там, якщо їх
depository
там приймуть.
institutions to be
Але
nominees
це вже
there,
питання не до
if
нас.
they are
Але якщо
accepted.
їх
Well,
там
but
приймуть,
it's not a question to us.
то вони
But if
можуть
they're
підтверджувати
accepted there,
права
they
власності
can
на
approve
Facebook в
the
Україні.
ownership rights
Я вважаю,
for
що
instance,
це
Facebook in Ukraine.
досить значний
And I
прогрес.
consider it to be a very substantial
Ну, є ще
progress. And
ще
there is
одна
one more
можливість, скажімо так.
opportunity, I'd say.
Як ви знаєте, в законом
As far
про
as you know,
депозитарну
as for the
систему
law on the
встановлено, що
depository
всі
system,
державні цінні папери,
we know that all of the state
неважливо, це
securities, in
облігації
spite
внутрішнього або
of the
зовнішнього державної позики
external or
на території
internal
України обслуговує Національний
governmental
банк,
bonds,
поки ця
they are
функція залишається у нас.
served by the National Bank. This
На жаль,
function is ours
Національний
so
банк
far.
до
And
2015
unfortunately, up till
року
2015,
реалізував
the National
тільки
Bank
облік
implemented
внутрішніх
only the accounting of the
облігацій, але ми
internal bonds.
надолужили цей
But we catched
момент, і з минулого
we
року у
caught
нас
up
в Clearstream
it,
відкритий клієнтський
and
рахунок, і вже
We opened the
певна
client's
частина
account, and a
учасників
certain
ринку
number of participants
через
of
нас
markets
в тій же
are
системі
served through
депозитарії
us in the
Нацбанку
same system
обслуговує
of the
облігації
Depository
зовнішньої
of
державної
banks.
позики.
Speaking about the
І
external
все
governmental
відбувається
bonds,
досить швидко і
so
зручно.
everything is very
Тому
quick and
це
convenient.
може не інвестиція за
Maybe
кордон,
this is
але
not the investment
інвестиція в
abroad, but still
інструмент,
this is an investment into
випущений
the
за
tool
кордоном. Це
which was issued
виключно
abroad.
суверенні наші
So those
євробонди.
are only our
Але
sovereign
досить цікавий,
Eurobonds. And
враховуючи
it's very
теж ті
interesting
ставки, по
experience taking
яким
into
вони
consideration
зараз
the rates
розміщаються на
which
зовнішніх
they
ринках. Я думаю,
use
що
at
для
the
локальних
external
інвесторів
markets. I
вони
think for the
теж
local
мають
investors,
певний
they
сенс.
also have a certain sense, and
Цьому сегменту теж треба
this
приділяти
segment needs to pay
серйозну
attention
увагу.
to. And there is one more point. We have the system, or even the procedure of the foreign securities coming into Ukraine through the accounts of the National Depository. For instance, if we take Facebook, if you have a wish, the process is developed already, and the depository can, and really does it already, supports you in this. We're working with the regulator. I thought that today we will boast with our first achievements, but unfortunately certain processes were delaying a bit. That is why, as soon as we have those pieces of news, I will let you know about that.
Thank you for your discussion.